We don't always go by the policy. We got all these backwoods guidelines that we got to follow.
Number of nails. We're talking number of nails at 0.00357 cents per nail or whatever it is. And they're fighting about cents of cents.
A lot of folks are not as persistent and their claim gets drawn out even longer.
All right, here we are, and we're sitting down. This is a first for us. We're sitting down with one of our clients to talk about his experience going through an insurance restoration project. And so here, I'm Joseph Patrick. I'm one of the founders of Lamont Brothers, and I'm sitting down with Taylor, who's our client, and Jacob is the project manager who worked on the project. And we're going to talk through the project. And this is going to be a really fun podcast because I think, and super valuable for clients, because I think people don't really understand what the process can be like to go through a home renovation after some type of disaster that's a restoration project covered by insurance. With that, let's dive in. Taylor, do you remember, why don't you tell us when you first reached out to us and what was the disaster that triggered the event?
Yeah, so it was, we had a mysterious disaster. It was a smell. And we didn't know where the smell was coming from, but we could smell it in the kitchen. And so we had one of those friends who comes over, and every time he comes over, he cuts a hole in your house. And he cut a hole in the floor to see if we had a crawl space and had access, and we didn't. And so we called a scope company to come scope the entire system in our house. And they said, right here, it's definitely the break. It's definitely a rodent issue. I was like, rodent issue, this sounds terrible. And so we called a mitigation company and had them come, and they masked everything off and cut a big hole in the floor. No crawl space, about this much space between the floor. And there was absolutely no rodent damage. And it was perfectly fine, capped sewer clean out.
And your house is what age?
Our house is 1930,
okay,
and then was remodeled in 2000.
Right on.
And so then we told the mitigation company, well, go to where we smell the worst smell and cut a hole there and see what you find. And there they found all the scooge under the house that had been blown out from this broken drain pipe. And it was in the kitchen underneath, it was a kitchen drain, so garbage disposal, dishwasher, just nasty food junk, and littered underneath with rodent sign. And so it was then they cleaned it up and had to basically remove the entire floor in the kitchen and dining room. And now they had also removed part of the floor in the living room. And we had a hole cut in the floor in the entryway. And it was then when they had finished up that I reached out to you. But it was right after that first cut in the floor and scope that I decided to file an insurance claim on the property. Our policy had a line regarding rodent damage, which was the operating assumption at the time. That's all we knew from the scope. And so we filed the claim and now had mitigation complete and reached out to you guys. And this is almost 9 months ago now, to come help make a plan for the rebuild. And so as that kind of went along, the house is sitting there and we're kind of waiting to hear if coverage is going to be offered on this claim. And the mitigation company had a guy who worked with insurance companies to get them to pay because they'd now sent a $13,000 bill. And I was contacting them via email kind of every other day. Do you have any updates on this? I'm waiting here, sitting, my hands are tied. My house is still kind of stinky. I'm kind of still waiting to have a floor. We had moved out, we're displaced throughout this whole process. And so it wasn't then until 2 months and 6 days after the claim was filed, I was counting exactly, 2 months and 6 days after the claim was filed, that they communicated that coverage had been extended on this claim. And this is with a constant nagging, a constant back and forth about precisely the nature of the cause of loss. And so I think within 1 hour of receiving that confirmation, I called and said, let's get on the schedule. And then it was walk through some of the process of, okay, well, how do you want this rebuilt, and get on the timeline for contractors. And as we then finally started the work on rebuilding, The house had been sitting vacant now for 5 months, and
And what did we determine, or what did you determine the cause was of the original damage?
we still didn't know.
Okay.
At this point, we still didn't know. We still assumed, we no longer assumed rodent. We now had seen that a pipe looked like it had slipped out of a joint underneath the range in the kitchen. But it was 6 feet under this no-crawl space. And so we needed to remove the cabinet and remove the floor in order to actually have eyes on this is the actual cause of loss. We still were in kind of, for lack of a better word, guessing mode. And the field adjuster had come out, and he's looking at it, and he's just guessing. He's like 50-50. I don't know if it slipped or broke or if it had nothing to do with that at all. So we didn't have much help from him. So we're now, 5 months after the claim's been filed. We finally start work and remove that cabinet, and the demo's now complete. The floor is entirely out. It's just the joists, and you can see that the pipe didn't slip out of a fitting, and it clearly wasn't a rodent issue. The pipe had burst. It had broken. Like there's a chunk missing out of it. And so kind of all along we had started with the rodent because that's what we knew. And then there was this really deep freeze where things abnormal happened. This home's been in this current condition for over 20 years and never experienced this kind of deal. It wasn't a glue failure. It was something happened that was catastrophic. And so now we were pretty well able to see it had frozen, it had broken, there was a chunk blown out of it. We'd run the dishwasher, the garbage disposal, food junk for 3 months or so had kind of spilled under the floor. And at the day that demo was complete, they worked around, your crews worked around and got to a section of the house, and you were like, there's more rot and damage here, and it's still wet. And we're not going to put new floor over this other damage. And so I was at another decision point. Okay, we're 5 months in now. Do we file another claim and start this all over? What do I do differently even this time around that we didn't do the first time around? And so I went ahead, and the best I could understand from my policy was that this was a covered loss. Our policy covered hidden dry rot or wet rot. No, not dry rot. Hidden wet rot or mold that was hidden underneath floors or behind walls or above ceilings. So you couldn't see it. If you knew it was there, there was no coverage. But if you didn't know, in this case, coverage was extended for this, theoretically. And so I filed a second claim, and there was a little delay as guys were getting shuffled around. But basically, at some point in there, insurance sent me through the ringer, and they said, this just sounds like you're trying to get a bunch of money from us for stuff you're making up. I mean, rodent to slipped out of a pipe to broken from a freeze to now we got a second claim. What are you even doing here? So they sent their special investigation unit out to grill every person that would had any fingerprint on this claim, which was a stressful experience and one that I don't really ever want to go through again.
I think they actually called them the special investigation unit.
Oh yeah, it was an intimidation tactic, I think even. and 100% still think it was an intimidation tactic. I don't think they found any new information from that process, other than a confirmation that everything we've said along the way was consistent and true, and I'm really just trying to get my house fixed, and I really want them to speed the process up. We had mitigation come out then, on this second claim, and they did work, and we were going to go through the same thing where they submit their bill to insurance and then wait 2 months to get coverage for that. They did that for the second claim, and eventually he just said, I don't want to fight that fight again. This is unlikely you're going to get it covered. We'll offer you a cash price, and just to make sure we get paid, we'll be out of here, and you can continue your fight alone. And so the cash offer was good enough. I paid it, and then we had the same issue kind of even with Lamont Crews. We can start work now. They still haven't extended coverage on this claim, but if it's not covered, you're going to have to pay this amount. And if it is covered, they're going to cover it eventually anyway. So might as well do it, right? And so we went ahead and started work on that. And within a couple weeks, then the whole thing was buttoned up. I mean, there was only, I think crews were only there for maybe 20, maybe 18 days or something. It wasn't a big project. At the end of the day, special investigation units, the work's complete, everything's buttoned back up, special investigation's complete, and we move back into our home, and there's still no word that confirmation of coverage. There's still no payout on any part of the restoration. They'd paid mitigation, and that was it. They hadn't paid any of the contractor fees, and so it was another 2 months. It was 9 months from the start of the claim to the day that they started releasing funds to begin paying contractor. And the way the whole thing kind of wrapped up, I was on them every other day. We had an insurance broker, not a direct agent, so they were checking with me and then calling on our behalf every week. Lamont had a guy who was working hard at that with us, and they eventually paid out in full, and everything was settled and taken care of as it should have been. I would have expected them to just pay the amount that I had requested, and they paid kind of whatever amount they felt like they needed to, and it was more than the amount that we had requested. I'm still a little bit befuddled by the whole process, but that's kind of how the whole thing unfolded. We're back in our home. We love it. We're thankful for your work and the work of your crews and the support in dealing with insurance throughout the whole journey for us. We never felt like we were alone in that, which I think is kind of one of the big things. Along the way, I remember even telling you, hey, I'm not checking my email anymore, just so you know. I'm not going to, they're emailing at weird hours Central Time, and I'm waking up to emails, and I'm going to bed sending emails. So if you need me, here's my number. Because there was just like anxiety, stress, frustration, disbelief. Like I'm arguing the same argument over and over and over and over, and it's not getting anywhere, but it's the true and only argument to make.
Yeah.
These are facts. Like it was a process I would love to never have to repeat, but I do feel better, more equipped on this side of it than I was going into it for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that you had in your court was you were tenacious. You were continually following up regularly, weekly, like every couple of days you were following up with your adjuster, with your broker. Hey, what's the status here? I haven't heard anything back. I haven't heard anything back. A lot of folks are not as persistent, and their claim gets drawn out even longer. And it's not uncommon that we find that we've already wrapped up, we've finished the project, we've moved on, and there is still money owed to the contractor and to the client by insurance. And it's just something that we have to continually follow up with. Where are we at here? Where are we at here? Because if they can let it go, they'll let it go, and they'll just let it drag on if you're not following up with them. So.
And I think that's one of the tactics that we've seen over and over again with insurance companies is to just delay and to deny. Like, I'm sure throughout that process, you were told things weren't covered that like actually ended up being covered.
Oh yeah, 100 times. The delay was one tactic, and we had the first adjuster who was assigned to the claim. She was on the claim for about a month, and then she did contact me and said, "Just want you to know I'm on vacation for the next 10 days." Like, you're taking a vacation right now? Are you kidding me?
And that's the only response you get. It's like, oh, by the way, I'm out.
Yeah, by the way, I'll be back in 10 days. I hope you can figure some things out in the meantime. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first time. The second time it happened, I'm on vacation for another 10 days. Now, this is just 2 months later. I'm like, if I had 20 days of vacation, man, my life would look a lot different than it does. But then we had a process. So while she was gone, there was a different adjuster assigned who had no idea what was going on in the claim. And so basically, start over, explain everything again, both times that she was out. Then I was following up hard right as we were wrapping up work and we were trying to get home, and I was like, just send the money so we can close the books on this. And I got an automated email that said our adjuster was no longer with the company. I was like, what do you mean she's no longer with the company? What happened to my claim? No one has told me this. I found it from the automated response system. And so I called like every number and sent every email to every person that I had with the whole company to say what happened to this claim. And then it had a new adjuster assigned to it. And and while she was kind of getting onboarded and trying to pick up the pieces, had no bearing on anything that had happened. Like, she called my wife, who had no part of the insurance process to date, instead of just responding to my email that I wrote to her directly. And so now we're introducing another variable, and she's telling her a story, and I'm talking to her, and eventually we got it all pieced together. But that was a part of the delay thing, was just they have real lives too. I have a real life, they have a real life too. And that's a kind of a part of the equation that I don't take into account is.
But I generally operate my life with the basic assumption that in general, people are good people and try to do their best. And I try to assume the best with everybody. And but I feel really bad for a lot of these adjusters, because in talking to friends of mine that have been adjusters, they're way overloaded with about twice as many cases as they should be, which might explain why it's not infrequent for them to no longer be with the company and be on vacation. I don't know how much, the vacation thing is that's always the case. And so I don't know how much vacation they get, but if I had as many cases as my friends tell me that they've got, and I had to work as many hours as they say they have to work, I'd want a lot of vacation.
When the field adjuster was out visiting, he came out 2 or 3 times during the process. The first time to get the initial write-up, the second time to revise it and kind of walk through with insurance, with Eric at Insurance here. And then they sent out a different field adjuster for the second claim. But when he came out, we said, "Do you know this adjuster that we're working with?" And he said, "Oh, I know her. She's got 1,900 unread emails in her inbox right now. Like your email, it doesn't make it to the top. That's not how email inboxes work. It makes it to the bottom, and she'll get to you when she can." And it's just such a small thing, and my question was very small. It took 2 seconds to respond to, but it was 2 weeks later I'd hear back, kind of thing.
But I think at some level that's an intentional understaffing, because the solution to that would be hire some more adjusters, so you have more capacity on the team to help people better, sooner, faster.
Yeah.
But in some sense, it's an intentional understaffing, maybe to keep costs down, but also because delay is part of the plan, right? We have totally had clients where they started the insurance process, and at some point in the process, they're like, "You know what? We're just going to call Uncle. This should cost $100,000 to fix, but I can do some of it myself. And, Uncle Bradley has volunteered to help on the weekends, and we'll just take the $50K and try to move back into our house. And I know it's not going to be what we deserve, and we got to do half the work ourselves, but we're just tired."
I was at that point maybe monthly for those 7 months. It would get to the point where I was like, it's just not worth it. Let's just pay the guys to finish and button up what they've done, and we'll put down we'll finish the project ourselves, what we can pay for. And I think one of the things that kind of helped along the way is I had just a lot of a council, a board of members, of counselors, so to speak, who were kind of helping us along the way. People who had done this before, Eric here at Lamont, just some guys that were saying, "No, keep going. They are obligated to pay this. And they've contractually entered an agreement where they will accept responsibility. They've even extended coverage. Stick with it. Don't give up." Eventually, that ended up taking a little bit more time for me to get paid and to pay a contractor. But in the end of the day, that did kind of pan out. And I would encourage that too. Stick with it. If I had tapped out any step along the way, I'd have half the house I had when it was all put back together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that comes down a little bit, that comes down to a fundamental belief of the way that we handle insurance is a lot of contractors who get a lot of work from insurance companies, direct referrals, you talk to the adjuster and the adjuster refers you to a particular company. I have seen, or at least I've talked to clients who describe their experience, and it looks like everybody comes together and tries to make compromises to keep the cost down for the insurance company. The insurance company agrees that, yeah, we should replace all the cabinets, but the money we're going to give you for the cabinets is enough to repair them. So why don't we just repair them? And I literally had this conversation with a client, and he, but I kind of fundamentally believe that, like, if you have an insurance policy that says they should, bring it back to pre-loss condition, that's what you should do. And unfortunately, the way the system works, that's very painful. It takes a long time particularly because of the delay and deny tactics. Tell me a little bit more about, like, what kind of deny tactics did you experience throughout the process?
Well, along the way, from the start, it was like, we don't cover rodent things. I was like, my policy kind of says that you do, so let's continue the conversation. And then mitigation was done, and there was maybe the pipe slipped out of the fitting, and they were like, well, we need to get a professional opinion on that. I'll get back to you in 3 days. And so the adjuster called some engineering firm in Arizona that never has experienced a freeze, maybe ever, and said, no, glue doesn't lose its integrity from a freeze. So it certainly didn't slip out. And that's not the cause of loss. And it was all kind of some of the denial was about the cause of loss was one of the main factors. It was like, no, that didn't happen. Or even when we were at the point where a mitigation company had said the freeze had caused this break, Lamont had said the freeze had caused this break. I was saying it was an uncharacteristic freeze that had caused this break. And we had other professional input on that. They were still denying and saying, well, did you see it break? I'm like, it's under the house. No, there's no crawl space. Of course I didn't see it break or notice it that day. I noticed the smell. So there was kind of denial along the way on the cause of loss. Because if they can prevent the policy from being triggered, then there's nothing more to do.
Yep.
Then there was, on the second claim, they were preparing to write a letter of denial. So they just told me outright, we're preparing to write you a letter of denial. And now, what that meant to me was absolutely nothing. No action had been taken. But what it felt like to me was, oh my goodness, now I'm on the hook for another, number of thousands of dollars to get this figured out. And so even just the way the phraseology sounded like denial along the way, and we've got our reports to back it, and all of our cards in a row, dominoes in a row or whatever whatever it is, and. So it just kind of sounded like denial-y along the way. And then even when they were walking through with you and me and Eric and looking at all these things, the field adjuster's out there, he's like, no, we're not going to pay for these people. And we're not going to pay for this part of the project. And we're certainly not going to pay for the plumbing.
Yeah.
And we're looking at him like, plumbing is the problem. Like, we're here because of the plumbing. And the policy did say, we don't cover plumbing fixtures except in the event of a freeze. And so it was like this hard fight to get, you will cover it because it's been established now that this was the cause of loss of this broken chunk that had spewed out under the house. And so it was kind of this it was denial at every point, at every turn, like, no, we're not going to do anything. We'll tell you that in 2 months, and just sit tight until we tell you that we won't do it in 2 months. And that was not a very fun game either.
And even though, like, to belabor the point a little, even though they said, no, we're not going to pay for these guys, no, we're not going to pay for the plumbing, no, we're not going to pay for this, they paid for it all.
They did. The no is a bluff. It was like a smokescreen. Yeah. It was one of those tricks to make me just say, enough's enough. Like, we'll just absorb the cost and get it fixed on our own. Right. We'll figure out how to pay for it. We'll take out a home equity or a personal loan or something and figure it out. Yeah. And make me do all the work. And this was an unbelievable game.
Yeah, I remember that day when that adjuster came out, and I'm standing in the hole where your kitchen floor was, and I'm looking at the pipe, and I'm like, can you literally tell me that you are not going to fix or pay to fix the broken plumbing pipe when the plumbing pipe was the problem that caused all of this, but you're willing to do some of this other work over here? Like, the guy, he stood there and he was like, yes, well, I mean, I could see the reasoning behind that, but, I'm going to have to put this in my report. He just really did the best he could to not be pinned down on any one decision right there, and just kind of squirm his way around it. Even at one point took my photograph so he could put it in his report because he wanted to know Like, who he was talking to back at the office or something.
Right. Who's the project manager on this one? Yeah.
Who's the person we're not going to pay for?
I guess that's me.
Yeah.
You know, God bless the adjusters, because I feel like they're part of a system that really has their hands tied, in the sense that like they only are able to approve certain things, and they have to like format it in a certain way, in this kind of like, not just an honest, like, here's the facts, this thing happened and the policy says we should fix it, so let's fix it, and they get approval for that. No, like they have all these other guidelines and other stuff that they have. We even had a adjuster at one point, we were talking to him on a call for a different project, and the question was put to the adjuster, like, I think it says in the policy that you should cover this thing. Can you point to where in the policy it says that you can't cover the thing? And it was one of those situations where he was kind of just denying that they're going to pay for the thing. And he says, no. You know, we don't always go by the policy. We got all these backwoods guidelines that we got to follow. And he literally used that phrase. We got these backwoods guidelines. And like, I think all of us on the call were like, are you kidding me? Like, he literally just said that on the recorded video call with all of us. That the policy isn't what determines what they cover, but it's the backwoods guidelines, which just blew my mind.
It's a pretty obvious, though, from the experience that they're operating on a different set of principles than on the principles outlined in paper. At the end of the day, though, the policy is what will show up and will stand in court, even if push comes to shove, where you need to get involved with that. We didn't ever have to involve an attorney officially. I just had sought some input from an attorney along the way, and had a connection through a family member, and his counsel was basically stick to the policy, keep everything, just keep good records, just stick with the policy. And if you can operate there, we'll hold him to the policy. And so at the end of the day, regardless of all the backwoods shenanigans that happen in the office, there is a policy out there. And I think that I mean, at the end of the day, most of the work I did was just copy and paste the policy into an email, because they're not proficient in my policy. They don't, apparently they weren't. That's, I guess, an assumption. They might have known exactly what they were talking about. But at the end of the day, my job, I felt like, was to inform them of their obligation to me per the contract that we had established. And so there was some weight to that, even though they have a secondary set of principles that are informing how they interact with that policy, which I think was part of my frustration, because it was black and white on a paper in front of me. I understood it. It's pretty logical and pretty extensive. And so it was pretty apparent to see, this is the line and the section that we're in. Just do that part, and then we're good to go.
You know, I think that's a super, super key point, because it's very easy for this is an extremely stressful situation. You're not living in your house. You know, you and your family have been totally displaced, and yet it's very easy to get distracted by all the other things, especially because the adjuster does come in as kind of an authority figure. And a lot of them are really, really good people, and they know their job is to kind of limit the costs that the insurance company pays, but they really, as a person, they want to help their people. And so they come in, and it's easy to like get distracted that like, wait, put everything aside. There's really one agreement that you've got with the insurance company. That's the policy. That governs everything. And lots of insurance companies have other guidelines. They tell you to do things. They ask for things, even from the contract. Oh, we have to see the cost in this exact format. Well, does the policy say that? Because like that's literally the only, document we have that you have an agreement with anyone. And so I think that's a really critical piece, is the policy is what governs it, not an adjuster's opinion, not the level of escalation they have to do. That's what's going to, if you do have to get an attorney involved, which, you got some counsel from one, and were, almost surprisingly able to bring it to a conclusion without it. But multiple projects, have had to go that route. And I've talked to a friend who's an adjuster, and he's no longer an adjuster anymore because it got so bad. But he said, I started being an adjuster about 4 or 5 years ago, and it wasn't too bad. I felt like I could really help my clients. I felt like I could do the right thing. Felt like I could get their stuff approved, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse over the years. And until I used to be able to approve stuff myself, and now my limit got smaller and smaller and smaller. And now projects over a certain size, this is a big nationwide company, projects over a certain size that I'm dealing with, I have to get the approval of one of 4 vice presidents in the entire company. Which now that also explains why the backlog. It's not only the adjusters got 1,900 emails, these poor vice presidents have 1,900 emails that they got to get through. And it was interesting to just learn from him that things had gotten worse over the 4 years he'd been part of the company.
I even assumed during the process there was a hurricane, there were some fires, there was a tornado string in the Midwest. I was like, my little small fry floor project is their least concern right now. I am the one that deserves the least and needs the least even. They ended up still taking care of me. I would still pursue that as a solution to the problem, but I also recognize that they're servicing a very large area with very big disasters all over.
Yeah.
But you were the guy that got the special investigation unit.
Right. I was, for the little bit of wet rot that was around the hot water heater. Yes.
Tell me what that was like a little bit more, because I was not there that day. Were you there for the special investigation unit?
Well, I was there. The special investigator, he actually interviewed us all independently. He wanted to get us one-on-one and kind of individually interview all of us. I happened to be out on my route for the day, so I had to take it in a call. And I don't know if it was maybe some of the tactic or not. I didn't talk to anybody else, but his phone recorder that he was recording our phone call kept interfering with the actual interview itself. He had to stop and check his recorder and get it back online and check in with me again. I'm like, can you even hear me? Are you getting my answers? And probably about 10, 15 minutes into this, he finally said, well, I think I have enough. Okay. And I'm like, but I'm not sure you got everything I can tell you. And he was done and moved along. And I was kind of puzzled by the whole experience because, like you said, we just kept repeating the exact same things over and over again. And we even saved them the broken ABS plumbing part so that they could take it home with it. We literally had it cut out. We went back. The plumbers cut it out when they fixed it. They didn't get the memo to save it. We even had them dumpster dive to get the part back out and bring it home, so that you could have it. And I don't know if I'm sure you probably.
It's mounted on the wall right now.
Oh, that's terrible.
Above the kitchen sink. Yeah. No, I threw it away as soon as as soon as the investigator had seen it. I was like, we have all we need from this.
Yeah, I do remember that day. It was something else. And they do frame it like, I'm going to record this conversation and we're going to get down to the bottom of this and all the rest of that. One thing I think that you were just mentioning that I hope folks realize, they don't get deterred if there's other disasters happening around the world. You had your place in the queue. You had your right to be heard, to have your claim properly handled.
Yeah, I think there's wisdom in the council too. I mean, I think if I was just going at it alone, I think I'd have given up a long time ago. Totally. But having the encouragement from you guys, having the encouragement from just kind of the council, the board of directors, I suppose, really kept me going. When they were denying, it was like, no, I'm going to deny you back. And when they were delaying, I was like, I'll meet your delay with an email every day, and you will not, this is not the end of me yet. And I think that I needed the encouragement. I needed the support along the way. My family did, just to keep going down the process, going down the road.
Yeah. Because I think, this isn't, most people don't file, most of the clients we work with, they've never filed a home insurance claim before. And their experience with insurance is relatively limited, and even, not much. Before, Had you ever filed an insurance claim in your life?
I had one insurance claim experience. It was an auto insurance, a limb fallen on our car, and I filed the claim, and they said, give me a quote, and I got them a quote, and they said, we'll send you 90% of your quote's estimate, and it was cash in the bank. I drove the car for another 4 years until it broke down for good, sold it for scrap, and used that money for other things. And so my experience with insurance was, okay, great, I'll file this claim, I'll read them the policy, they'll pay me the money, we'll have the work done, we'll be back in a month. Like, it's not a huge project. It's not how it went. And so I felt, I would encourage you to find somebody who has had experience to help you walk through this and not go at it alone. You'll be intimidated. You mentioned that the adjuster comes in feeling strong or as an authority. I totally felt small and weak and exposed. And when they sent that to the special investigation unit, I questioned everything about the whole claims process and my own integrity. And then pretty soon I was like, am I a fraud in my life? And was my life just a failure and faking it until I make it? And it was the voices of people around me that were able to speak into, no, you are who you say you are. No, what you've said is true. You're honest. You're working hard at this. But just the way it made you feel was just like gross.
Oh, totally.
Like there were a couple of days that were just like set back entirely. Like, I can't focus on anything. And if it weren't for my wife, my in-laws, the people around me that were kind of helping inform that and encourage that and say, no, it's a part of the journey. At one point you said, this is just how it goes. It's not really anything out of the ordinary, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just keep going, ride the wave. I think was really helpful. I'd encourage that to anybody for sure.
Yeah. There's terminology and verbiage that they use that the common person is not familiar with, like code upgrades or enhancements or project scope. A lot of us are not familiar, or the way they use the terms are not the same as some of us do in the construction industry when we're talking about scope or enhancements or code or upgrades. And so if you use the wrong terminology when you're in discussion with them, then that triggers another discussion. Or, oh, wait a minute, is that an upgrade? Are you adding to this project? Because we can't allow that. We're going to have to deny that. And then that ends the conversation. You have to start back over and be like, no, let me make sure I'm using the proper terminology so that we're communicating well, because otherwise you're not even talking the same language half the time.
Yeah, and I think there is a thing, like we have to acknowledge, like insurance fraud is a thing. And like one of their jobs is to make sure insurance fraud doesn't happen. And I think even as a company, like we're not the right fit for every client that has a restoration claim, and we have actually fired clients because we realized, oh wait, this is what's going on here. Is we've got a client who is looking at it saying, well, I had this, event, and I need to like figure out a way to tell a story that this event like caused way more damage than it actually caused. And then I want to collect all that cash and I want to go buy something else. And like, that's not insurance and that's not what it is. And I think especially in a situation where, you've got costs like home repairs that are really hard to, just really complicated and really interconnected, and everything is custom. It's like, that has to be avoided. And I get that the insurance company and the adjuster needs to find a way to avoid that. But so much of what I actually see is not helping. It's really like just deny coverage and delay, not like actually address and figure out what's going on. It doesn't, like the things that I observe aren't the things that would prevent insurance fraud.
Yeah, one of the things, so they need to prevent that. As a homeowner too, this was we'd owned the home for 3 years. It's kind of our first rodeo. We're new homeowners and had just spent our savings on this. And so the role of insurance is one that's, I think, worth talking about, because I have insurance because my lender requires me to insure the home so that I am able to pay for repairs and continue to pay my mortgage, basically. And the insurance company has an obligation, or its role, I suppose, in there is to take care of the property and keep it at the level that it was when I bought it. They're not doing the enhancements. They're not making it better necessarily. In the end, working is better than not working, and so it's still an improvement in that regard. But they're not there to give you your dream kitchen. They're there to get your kitchen back to how it was before this loss. And I think that that's important to kind of understand. And I didn't really know how all that worked at the beginning. I didn't know what that word meant, a betterment or an enhancement or anything like that. And then they're there not to get taken advantage of, so that they're not doing those things. And so you're right. They kind of, instead of giving more and just like, we're free with our resources and here, go fix your house, they're like stingy with it. And to the point where now it becomes this fight to even get them to pry their claws open and give you what you are actually owed in the project by virtue of the contract.
Yeah, and that's why, like, actually, oftentimes it's helpful to get an attorney involved, because then you've got a guy that his expertise is legally what's the insurance company obligated to pay for, and he can help inform you, sometimes even be one of your counselors. Sounds like you did talk to one, where he just gives you guidance to say, like, okay, let's take all of the interested parties out, like you and the insurance company, all of you come with different baggage here, but I can come in and kind of educate and inform with, like, what's actually obligated here. And that can kind of cut through things. But more often than not, what we've seen is that it ends up with the insurance company needing to cough up some additional money to cover the cost of the project, because the projects that we work on are not ones where people are trying to get a bunch of free upgrades. They just want to get their house back.
Yeah.
So, maybe wrapping this up, what things do you feel like you've learned through the process that, like, you would approach differently if you did the thing again, or if we have another freeze and a tree falls on your house, God forbid? Like, what do you feel like you're equipped and you've learned through the process?
I think my expectations have been totally reordered, which changes the way I would interact again. I mean, I think in one of the emails to the adjusters, I said, trust me, believe me, I'm not in this to get rich. I'm in this to get my house fixed. I hope never, ever, ever again to file another home insurance claim in my life. I promise. This is not a tactic. I'm not playing a game. And so I would hope never to do it again, would be takeaway number one. I would avoid it, which would require then me to be able to self-insure my projects, my damage. I mean, if a tree falls on the roof, I don't have $200,000 sitting around to do a whole West Wing remodel, or repair. And so there's some things where, of course, insurance is going to be required. But for the little things, I would love to be able to self-insure, and at least file the claim, enlist the contractor, and say, I'll work on the claim part, you work on the house part, I'll pay you up front, and then I'll get reimbursed from insurance, would be probably how I would ideally interact in that process in the future, to the degree that I'm able to do that financially. Yeah. That was like, my expectations are changed. I understand now it's a different kind of length, a different speed of interacting with them, different levels of frustration, and so expectations change, but I also would probably interact differently on that regard too, and think differently about how I interact with them. It's not a car insurance thing where they're just going to send a check and let you figure out how to fix it. They're going to send you a check, and it's going to be for about 10% of the project, and hope that that's enough to just satisfy you until you keep fighting. So I would figure out a way to pay for it up front and then fight insurance after from my home instead of being out of my home. I think one of the related things that I've learned that I would value and that I've done differently already is I would understand the policies and the contracts that I sign and that I interact with. Like we had an auto insurance renewal, and it's through the same company. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to read this policy front and back and know exactly what's covered and what's not, and what triggers the event of them filing a claim and things. And so I would encourage someone to take that folder that comes in the mail and not just chuck it, but read it and know it. In part, know it in the decision-making process at least. I don't think you need to just have that information stored. But when you're thinking, should I file a claim or not, open the policy and read the language and do your best. Get someone else to read it who's navigated it before. And and have a good understanding of what you're getting into and how that process will work with insurance.
No, I think that's super helpful and super important in that, like, home insurance is a little bit, it's a different ballgame from most of the auto repair stuff I've seen, and partly because it's that custom repair stuff. Like, I wish in remodeling we could establish like a cost standard, like when you go to the auto repair shop and there's a book value to like replace the transmission. Like, the guy who wrote the book, I don't know who that is, but the guy who wrote the book says it should take 6 hours to pull and put back in a new transmission. And if you're really good, you could do it in 4, or if you're slow, you can do it in 8, but like the book value is 6. That just doesn't exist in home remodeling. So it's a similar thing where, like, we've had clients where like the insurance company sends them an initial check, and either the client says, great, I got $10,000 to fix my house. They have no idea what stuff costs. They take it and they get started, and then they find out, oh, it's gonna be $90,000. Or, you know, most of the time they don't end up stuck, like, settling, but often insurance companies will say, hey, this is all you're going to get. You get $10,000, and they want you to kind of take it like you do with a car repair or something like that, where like you can actually take that initial cash that they send you. And I don't think with the mortgage company you can actually not repair your house. But you can take that and work on fixing your house. Whereas it's just so different because it's, you know, so undefined, and often it's just massively more than is, you know.
And there's microscopic detail.
Yeah.
I mean, walking through the house, I couldn't believe we were having to count. I mean, part of the estimate that Lamont built was a number of nails to refix cabinets after repair. Number of nails. We're talking number of nails at 0.00357 cents per nail or whatever it is. And and they're fighting about like cents of cents on the number of nails we need, or it was inches on cabinets.
Yeah.
It was a number of inches of baseboard that we need. Number of inches. I mean, you go to Home Depot, you buy 8-foot section of baseboard for what, $12 or something, or $20.
Yeah.
They're talking about halves of pennies, and that's some of the level of detail that was part of the delay. That makes it really hard to navigate.
Yeah.
And I think I would advocate that you find a contractor that understands the insurance process, that has experience with that, and even has someone dedicated to that who can navigate that really well and seamlessly advocate for you at the same time.
It's true, because it's like nobody actually estimates that way in the construction industry in terms of the type of thing that the insurance company wants to see. Like, just nobody estimates that way because it doesn't make any sense. But like, they've got to come up with some way to do it. And it's just the system that, you know, was developed a long time ago and is still running and is mostly advantageous for the insurance company, because they, especially with the initial estimate, they're like, bury you with that level of detail. And it's easy in the beginning to look like, well, wow, they literally counted every nail in here. Of course this is enough money, until you realize, like, oh wait, they're using an hourly rate that's like up to date, which means it's like 25% of what people get paid these days in Portland. And it just isn't going to work. You're going to say something.
Yeah, and then the fun variable there is they're using estimating software to estimate how much they believe your project is worth and what they're going to be paying you for your project. And yet they're not obligated to pay for estimates. So when we bring them an estimate that's matching, most of the verbiage in contracts, in your policy contracts, is that they're not obligated to pay for those estimates. They want factual invoices after the fact. So there's that uncomfortable part where you actually have to get the ball rolling and start your project to get some invoices so you can submit to them so they start paying you. You know,
Yeah, and that is, I feel like, a really difficult part for a lot of people, where in a perfect world, if I was a homeowner, I would want to have the disaster happen, get an estimate from a contractor that says they can fix it for X price, get the insurance company to sign off on that, and then get it fixed all in a reasonable amount of time. But there's this really, really scary place where, like, You get the estimate from the contractor. The insurance company says it should cost 10% of that. And then you've got this, oh my gosh, if I actually get started on this, am I going to be on the hook for 90%? Well, like, kind of. But like, isn't the insurance company going to pay for it? Well, often they'll say, no, we're not going to pay for it as part of the denial thing. But then actually, that's where you have to do what you did, which was go back to the policy and say, wait, let me like remove the stress. Let me really understand, okay, the policy says they have to fix my house when this happens. Okay, good. Then I should be fine. And I shouldn't be on the hook for all of this if the insurance company fulfills their obligation.
Yeah, that policy is your contract. And that's the contract that they entered into with you. And if you've done your part by paying for your insurance policy along with your homeowners along the way, then that's a contract they entered into with you, and they should be obligated to pay it, to take care of you and make it right. The tension is right there in the middle. Like, you have that primary relationship with your insurance company, and then we come alongside of you as a contractor to try and partner with you, but we don't really have the control to like tell your insurance they have to approve. We can advocate for you. We can state your case, and we can come alongside and help you. But honestly, like, you really do, as the homeowner, need to like stand your ground and not fold when they try and put the pressure on you.
Yeah, and some of that was even the application of the take counsel with others piece was insurance is not obligated to talk to anybody except for me, really, practically. Their contract or agreements with me as the homeowner. And so even taking counsel with you about how should I talk about this with them was some of the way to say, all right, I have the policy, I'm the voice person, I'm advocating for myself, but I've got Jacob's voice in Jacob's words, Jacob's help forming my thoughts and structure. I think that counsel is really helpful because they do really have to talk to you at the end of the day, interact with you. That's kind of what our broker was fighting for kind of along the way, was just talk to the guy, just reply to his email, just give him a call. And so, but having the expertise, because I'm not the expert, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm kind of making stuff up. I think I read this on page 4. But having someone give voice to that was really valuable.
Well, it's like, how long did it take? But you're finally back in your home. 9
months from filed to paid.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In 1 day. 9 months in 1 day.
And it's, it was a relatively small project that should definitely not have taken anywhere close to 9 months. I think it took us, 5 weeks maybe, actually work. But you're back in your home right now.
Yep. The story ends well.
Story's ended, and it ends well.
Ended.